Do you have notes for this?
Not really.
Cool.
So are you introducing this, or?
I don't know. We haven't really talked about anything.
That's good. It'll be fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Authentic.
Hi, everyone. So you may notice that our set looks a little bit different today, and that is because I have my partner, Rob, here with me today. We've decided to do a series that we're hoping to do where we talk more about how schizophrenia has affected our relationship or continues to affect our relationship. So maybe a bit of a background on the progress of our relationship. So we met in 2018 and dated for a year before we got engaged. We got married in the summer of 2020, pandemic wedding, so that was fun. And then we had a child together in April of 2021. And we also had 2 kids from your previous relationship as well, who we also parent. So that's kind of the quick synopsis of the progression of our relationship. So I don't know, do you want to dive right into it? How do you think schizophrenia has affected our relationship?
So it must have been like the 3rd date where you kind of like took me for a cookie and coffee and were like...
Buttered him up with a cookie.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, you approached it delicately and told me that you had schizophrenia and that you managed it with medication. And I think I was pretty open to it, like at the time, and I was curious and did a bunch of research, and you know, I think, to be honest, like we kind of joke about this a little bit, but like how we like catfished each other.
Don't share that.
Why not? So, you know, yeah, you can manage it with medication, but it's not like you can manage everything with medication. It does affect your life and our relationship. And then the other side of the like catfishing thing was just like my kids acted like really cute and like angels. And then, you know, as soon as you moved in, it was kind of like the gloves are off. And
they're still sweet, but they're real children, you know? They're not like these angelic little children.
They did a really great job of like sealing the deal, you know?
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah. They really made me fall in love quickly. But in terms of the schizophrenia, I may have downplayed it a little bit by being like, oh yeah, I completely manage it with medication. That I think it's hard to actually convey what it's like to live with and manage an illness like schizoaffective disorder or schizophrenia to someone on a 3rd date. And I'm also terrified of sharing this. And so I'm wanting to present it as nice and with a ribbon on top as possible.
Kind of as a discreet thing, not like, oh, this is actually an ongoing conversation.
This dictates my life. You buckle up. Like, you know, that's not really what you want to convey on a 3rd date.
Right. I understand that.
So sure, maybe I catfished a little bit in that regard. But how do you think it has affected our relationship?
I mean, I think that it's affected our relationship in a ton of different ways.
Yeah.
Like, and I think often it's difficult to like separate our relationship from the illness. It's just kind of like part of it in terms of like, I mean, we talk about when we deal with conflict, and I feel like it's very much like present when we're dealing with conflict in terms of like when symptoms happen, and or like if we're in conflict, a relationship conflict, then symptoms flare up, and you know, kind of vice versa.
I think that's something that's kind of tricky, is that I don't like outwardly show that I'm symptomatic very often, or like it's kind of hard for other people to know if I'm symptomatic. And sometimes it's hard for me to know if I'm symptomatic because it just is so entwined into how I process the world. And so trying to like separate that is almost an impossible feat in terms of separating what part of my thought process is me and what part of my thought process is affected by my schizoaffective disorder. That's kind of impossible to do. And so then again, I was saying like it's hard for you to see when I'm symptomatic. And so it's even more difficult to separate those things and know this is a presentation of her illness, as opposed to I don't understand it. Like it kind of is more like I don't understand what she's doing. I can't make sense of this. And it's like it's very much stuck in it's hard to like take account of the fact that my illness is sometimes.
I remember like, especially early on in our relationship, kind of taking things personally.
Yeah.
Like if you, like, I think that I would feel like you were mad at me for something or whatever, if you were having like flat affect or, that kind of thing. And it took quite a while to kind of break out of that feeling like you were mad at me for something and that's why you were kind of brushing me off or like that kind of thing.
I think you still have a hard time with it.
I do.
Like when I'm experiencing flat affect, I sense it more from Rob than I do from myself. Like I don't pick up on the fact that I have flat affect until I sense that he's behaving differently around me and he's kind of like thinking something's wrong. And you often ask that. You're like, what's wrong? What's going on? And then I have to be like, oh no, I just have flat affect. But I still think that you think that like something's up. And it's hard to understand that, no, that's just a part of what my experience of this illness is.
Yeah. I think that kind of brings up like a bunch of different points. Like the fact that we are very codependent, I think, with each other. Like we live together, we work as partners, we obviously like parent together, like we're always with each other, kind of like 24/7. And so like just given that like relationship, I mean, if you remove like mental illness from that sort of situation, it still is like a difficult situation where you're like with somebody all the time, like you get in each other's hair sometimes.
It's kind of ripe for maybe not conflict, but
yeah, friction.
Friction, yeah. And then you add in the mental illness component, and we go to therapy together a lot.
Yeah. I think, like, if you just work with somebody that you're a partner with, and you're around them all the time, you should just go to therapy. I mean, I think people need that kind of separation throughout the day, where they can go and they can be their own people, but we don't do that.
We don't do that. Yeah. So we'll probably do a whole other video on the topic of codependency.
Yeah.
I think that might actually be something that people who are living with a mental illness kind of experience more. Like I can understand why that would be the case.
In relationships.
And like anecdotally talking to other people who have mental illness in relationships, codependency is something that has come up a lot. And, I kind of maybe get why. And so maybe that's, we'll explore that more in the codependency video, but that's a thing we navigate.
So what do you think is the biggest way that schizophrenia has affected our relationship?
That's a big question. I don't think I have a good answer in terms of something that sums it all up because like you were saying, it shows up in a lot of different facets of our relationship. But before this, you had brought up the topic of capacity. And I would agree, that's kind of a big one.
This is something, yeah, I mean, I guess that would be both of our answers then.
Yeah.
Just that has been quite a large and difficult subject to like navigate, like kind of from the beginning.
My perspective on this is very much that like I don't have a lot of acceptance around the fact that my capacity has changed from what it was or could have been pre/without mental illness, without navigating living with schizoaffective disorder. And so I very much have it in my head that I have the capacity to go after everything that I want to do and to push myself to limits that deep down I know are not actually within my limits. And so when new things that I want to do come up and I look to my partner for like,
what do you think? Or support.
I look to you for support and like to be my cheerleader and like, yeah, you can absolutely do this. I will support you doing this.
Yeah.
And then I don't get that because of what you were describing of like you wanting to kind of like protect me, protect us, protect our life. Because what inevitably happens when I go after things that are outside of my capacity, I just kind of crumble. And we end up in often a crisis state because my mental health has deteriorated to a point where my life is falling apart. Inevitably, our life is falling apart. And it's difficult. And so, yeah, I can like explain that right now. But when you're in it, it's a lot more difficult to navigate.
I think like, and I mean, this is just an ongoing thing. This isn't something that like we have solved, but I definitely like understand, I think, your perspective more in terms of, and it's difficult to navigate, but the perspective of like feeling like I'm telling you can't do something makes you feel like, oh, now I have to do it,
Yeah,
and
it makes me even want to like prove harder that, well, no, I can do it. Like,
and then also the like, I understand that like you're sensitive to feeling like controlled, and I don't want that to come across.
My paranoia seeps into this as well, where it's like I get really paranoid that Rob is trying to like keep me down, control me by like bringing a realistic lens to these endeavors that I'm wanting to go off on. So there's like a lot of layers of potential conflict inherent in the topic of dealing with my capacity. So we're working on that in therapy. So along the topic of capacity, kind of another branch of that I think has been difficult to navigate at times is my reduced capacity in terms of contributing to everyday things, keeping up with life, housework, various keeping up with life tasks that I typically struggle with because of things like lower executive functioning and avolition and all these things that kind of go along with having a mental illness like schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. It's hard to keep up with you. And I described it in therapy the other day as like, I always feel like I'm like 2 steps behind you. And that's difficult for me, mostly because I think it's difficult for you. And I think that I'm letting you down and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the time, even though like we run this channel and it's schizophrenia is present in our life like on a daily basis, I still don't like look at you and that's what like I don't think that, I don't think about like reduced capacity. I don't think about that kind of thing. Unless you're like very symptomatic and then it's like, okay, I know what's going on. But, especially like the negative symptoms, it's hard to kind of like feel like identify it that, okay, you're experiencing something. And so you're not thinking about doing the dishes or like trying to keep up with housework or that kind of thing.
It's an invisible illness. And so I think that that's probably something that a lot of couples who one partner is living with an illness like schizophrenia kind of struggle with, is that it's impossible unless I'm constantly communicating my mental state and like what's going on with me, which is personally impossible. I don't think I could do that. And I don't know a lot of people who could do that. It's like impossible for you to know what's going on and why I'm not on top of laundry, on top of the dishes, on top of whatever, because like if I had a broken arm, you know, the age-old comparison, it would be like, oh, well, you know, she can't do the dishes because she can't get her arm, you know, wet, or she can't do that with her arm. But because it's invisible, it's all internal in my mind, that's kind of keeping me from having the capacity that I would like to have. It's harder to recognize.
Yeah.
And to empathize with. And so I think that creates a situation where conflict can come about, because why aren't you keeping up with this stuff? You know, we're equal partners, or we're supposed to be equal partners. So come on. But then that creates where I feel like I need to be an equal partner at all times, or like, I feel like I sometimes try too much to keep up and kind of end up overextending myself. And then I just kind of crumble. And then there's a period where I have even more reduced capacity because I'm kind of like reeling from overexertion.
Yeah. I don't really know what to add there. I think that like this is again something that's kind of like ongoing, and I think we're trying to figure out ways to kind of manage it in a healthier way. Like, you know, like I understand, I mean, communication is another like huge topic that I think we're going to be like diving into, but trying to give you like gentle reminders about doing things. But I think we're also going to be trying to figure out like more like visible like reminders about how to like what to do, that kind of thing. And I guess it feels a little silly that we haven't figured this out yet. Like it feels like something that we should have figured out like kind of from the beginning, but there's just so many little things like that.
We're like outside of being in a partnership. I think that this is something that people who are living with an illness like schizophrenia really struggle with. Like it's not something that you just quickly figure out how to do. Like I know a lot of people who are well into their adult life and have not figured out how to work within their capacity to keep up with the things that they need to keep up with. And so then when you bring in another person and you're in a partnership, it becomes even more difficult to figure out how all the pieces work together and how to keep up with life.
Yeah.
So we don't want this video to get too long, but we just kind of wanted to give you a taste of how schizophrenia has affected our relationship. And like we said, we're going to be diving deeper into various topics around this in videos to come in this series, I guess you could call it. But we would love to hear more from you guys too, how schizophrenia affects your relationships. If you want to share about that, we would love to hear from you in the comments below. I also just want to take this opportunity to remind you about our online peer support community. You can gain access to this by becoming a patron on our Patreon page. The link is in the description below. But through our online peer support community, you get access to peer support in a variety of different mediums, including weekly peer support groups. So if you are interested in getting connected with people who are experiencing similar issues or struggles as you are around schizophrenia, living with schizophrenia spectrum illness, make sure to check that out.
And we actually have like, there's a text channel that's about like family and support people and
relationships. Yeah. So yeah, make sure to check that out. So thank you so much for watching. And as always, wishing you and your loved ones good health. See you in the next video. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Are you cool? You ready?
I'm not cool. This is awkward. It's just like where am I put my hands? Now people can see my crotch, you know? But now my hands are in my crotch.
Well, don't man spread.
Now if we do this, our legs are like mirroring each other, like, you know? And if I do this, then my feet are in the shot. There's no good way to sit in this chair. Okay, I'll
close your legs. Awkward.
This is the worst. Okay, how about I get to do this and you get to do something
I
else?
usually sit like this in this chair.
Okay, go ahead. That's perfect. I'm good like this.
Rude, you just took my stance.
But you said you usually sit like this.
I'm trying to give you options.
Okay, so I'm going to take this option.
No, take this option.
can't I take this option? You take that option.
I had that option.
Like this. I'm too big. It looks awkward.
Okay. Is this okay for me to do? Kind of like facing you like this? Mm-hmm. Does it look okay?
Yeah. Totally.
I don't look awkward.
No. This is the best for me.
Happy for you.